indeed a great honor for me to be here, engaging with you on our pre-budget vote engagement, as we will table tomorrow afternoon. Through that budget vote, we will account for how DIRCO has carried out its mandate, advanced South Africa's national interests and values, and contributed to building of a better Africa and a better world. We will also take stock of our achievements and our setbacks, while setting out the work we intend to carry forward in the year ahead. That act of accounting comes at a moment with rich historical meaning. Our freedom, a continental responsibility. This 2026 is a year of major milestone in our national life. We mark 70 years since the historic Women's March to the Union Buildings, 50 years since the 1976 Youth Uprising, and 30 years since the adoption of our Constitution. Each of these milestones reminds us that freedom in South Africa was never achieved in isolation. It was carried by workers, women, young people, communities, and by the people of our continent who understood that the defeat of apartheid was a continental responsibility. It was also the people in the diaspora and the international community. The formation of the Organization of the African Unity, whose 63rd anniversary we mark on this day, was one of the clearest expressions of that is shared responsibility and solidarity in the African continent. This year, as we mark Africa Day, we do so in an atmosphere charged with unease. Across parts of our country, migrants of African descent have come under attack at the hands of groups and formations that seek to polarize our society. Government has been emphatic that these attacks have no place in a constitutional order. They are an attack on the values of Ubuntu and the right to dignity. We acknowledge the economic hardships many South Africans face, as well as the growing concerns about crime in our society. But no grievance, however legitimate, can justify violence, scapegoating, or attacks on people based on their nationality. We cannot accept citizens usurping the powers of law enforcement agencies and unleashing violence on other human beings. To a certain extent, act as law enforcement by checking whether you are a South African or you are a foreign national. At the same time, we've been clear that South Africa faces the challenge of irregular migration, and that migration must be managed in an orderly, lawful, and human manner. It must be law enforcement that attend to the issues and the challenges of irregular migration. Every country has the authority to regulate migration and enforce its laws within its domestic borders. When we speak of regional integration and engaging on all the issues that needs to enable our economy to function through movement of people and goods, we are not speaking about lawlessness. We are acknowledging that there are challenges where there is intersection with criminality, and that must be dealt with by law enforcement. The question and the challenges arises because we know we have got weaknesses in this regard. In the part of law enforcement, to ensure that those who come into South Africa are those that are supposed to be in South Africa regularly and lawfully. And the SIU reports have indicated the challenges we have with the corruption in some of the institutions. And this is what the state needs to respond to and to deal with. We have also been very clear that migration in itself is not a problem. When properly managed, it can contribute to regional development. No country is an island, and no country can succeed in isolation. South Africa is one of the 7 SADC countries out of 16 member states that has ratified the 2005 SADC Protocol on the facilitation of the movement of persons and goods. Similarly, South Africa supports and aligns itself with the African Union Free Movement of Persons Protocol. So this shows that South Africa is a law-abiding citizen. It's a country run with the rule of law, and we take our international obligations and responsibilities seriously. The question is, how do we balance this with our domestic capabilities to enforce the law? And also, how do we balance this with also our international obligations to ensure that there is a shared responsibility with all our other African brothers and sisters, other member states of the African Union and SADC, in examining the push and pull factors in relation to migration. These are frank and open engagements that we'll have to have with our sister countries. We are one of the highest receiving countries in the continent, and migrants have contributed immensely to the growth of our economy. Similarly, we have also faced challenges that arise out of irregular migration. The responsibility to respond to this challenge should not only be left to South Africa alone. At a domestic level, we have to deal with the challenges we face internally in terms of the enforcement of the laws related to migration, including the corruption I spoke about earlier on. But at the continental level, we also need to deal with the push and pull factors, the challenges of governance and other issues that leads to us being the highest receiving country in the south of the continent. These are frank engagements we'll have to have in the multilateral platforms in the continent. As we approach the 50th anniversary of the youth uprising, the point is perhaps best made by looking at the state of young people in the continent today. Africa is the youngest continent in the world. More than 60% of Africans are under the age of 25. By 2050, 1 in 4 young people in the world will be an African. Yet the prospect facing many young Africans remain grim. A 2025 Afrobarometer survey of 38 countries shows that nearly 6 in 10 young Africans between the ages of 18 and 25 have considered leaving their homes, countries in search of a better prospect elsewhere. More than 70% cite the need to find work and economic hardships as the main reasons. I must make it clear, this Afrobarometer does not only talk about in all other African countries except South Africa. It includes South African young people who are also on the receiving ends of unemployment and all the challenges and social ills. This means that for many young Africans, migration is not just a choice, but compulsion. By 2030, as many as 30 million young people are expected to enter Africa's job market each year. Yet our economies together currently create only 3 million jobs annually in the whole continent. For South Africa and for the continent, this is a serious warning. If young people cannot find work, imagine a future for themselves, or build lives of dignity, they will move on, and the continent will lose much needed skills for our economy. For Africa to thrive, we must create opportunities for our continent's greatest assets, its young people. One of such opportunities is the Africa Free Trade Area, with an estimated population of 1.3 billion African people. How do we ensure that this AFCTA achieve its objectives of regional integration, of trading amongst each other as African countries, of growing the African economies? SADC also has its own strategy in terms of regional integration. We have just come out of the retreat, as the DM has said, and sadly, we are trading with each other at SADC, and this is one of the most organized regional economic zones of regional economic communities of the African continent. The RECs is SADC. It's one of those are well organized, but we are only trading at a micro 21% with each other. We are trading more with Europe than with each other in the SADC region. It's the same in many other parts of the continent. And it is for that reason that we had this retreat to say, what are the bottlenecks? What are the challenges? Why can't we find these areas of trading with each other? And we've identified a number of them, including infrastructure, the border posts, the interoperability of the borders, and so forth. And we will be able to share and announce them during the summit that these are the strategies that we are going to come up with. But these are issues that we are now grappling with. And we have also said we have to maybe task our ministers of trade and industry and give them a target that by these particular years, we must achieve 50% trade within the SADC region. The question is which year? I don't want to announce it because I don't want to put them under pressure. We want them firstly to come up with a strategy and to say they believe this is achievable within this particular period. But I'm raising it for you because some of you are academics. You can study, you know what are the trade and non-tariff barriers that have inhibited the capability of SADC to be able to achieve the high level of inter-regional trade. This Africa Day also demands that we defend our hard-earned democracies, regional stability, security of our own region and the continent. For this reason, the region and the continent must hold constructive and comprehensive discussions on root causes of migration, including related socio-economic, governance, and security dimensions. As a leading host country of migrants on the continent, we will continue to engage with our brothers and sisters in the continent in a frank, robust, and cordial engagement. We do think that this discussion should not be for cameras, should not be for our domestic political survival or means. Because if my brother in Ghana does it for the domestic audience, I will also do it for my domestic audience in South Africa. And someone in Zimbabwe will do it for their domestic audience in Zimbabwe. I do it for my domestic audience in South Africa. Someone in Egypt, someone in Nigeria, someone in Kenya. The result will be a highly polarized and inflammatory African continent. So we need restraint. We need sober engagements. We need to be informed by data, by evidence, and by statistics, including the various protocols that we've signed to respond to these economic realities of our continent. In this politically charged environment, we call for responsible diplomacy, public engagement that does not fan the flames of division, and leadership that relies on credible information, rejects disinformation, and refuses any campaign designed to turn Africans against one another. Our responsibility towards Africa's cause remains very key, because Africa's freedom and South Africa's freedom is the responsibility of all of us. Our shared goals and prosperity is in the hands of all of us. Let me outline what we believe are the three responsibilities that confront us on this Africa Day. The first responsibility is to affirm African agency in a world marked by uncertainty and power contestation. Africa cannot be a passive recipient of decisions made elsewhere. We must shape the terms of our own development, defend our collective interests, and insist that the continent has a rightful place in the making of global order. This is the spirit in which South Africa has approached its work in the G20 and BRICS and other platforms of global governance. Through these platforms, we have placed Africa's priorities at the center of global discussions. One of these priorities is debt sustainability. The figures are stark. More than half the continent, some 750 million Africans, live in countries where debt service squeezes out investment in teachers, nurses, textbooks, infrastructure, and jobs. This is why South Africa uses G20 presidency to call into question a global financial architecture that too often rewards creditors and punishes ordinary people. The Africa Expert Panel recognizes that this is not a simple debt crisis. It is a developmental crisis. It called for reforms to lower the cost of borrowing, greater transparency in the work of credit rating agencies, and the establishment of a borrowers' club to strengthen the collective voice of indebted countries. Our presidency also placed climate finance, disaster resilience, beneficiation at source, and inequality at the center of this agenda. Through the proposal for an international panel on inequality, South Africa has argued that inequality weakens democracies by deepening instability and increasing the popularity of political forces that mobilizes on hate and division. Together with Brazil, Spain, and Norway, South Africa plans to introduce a UN General Assembly resolution on the creation of an international panel on inequality later this year. The second responsibility is to deepen regional and continental solidarity. The recent SADC foreign ministers' retreat, as the DM mentioned, pointed in this direction. SADC is a product of solidarity. SADC ministers agree that our region must be better prepared to respond to external shocks, whether they arise from conflict, climate disasters, food and fuel price volatility, public health emergencies, or the decisions of powerful actors far beyond our borders. Peace and security remains central to this responsibility and to our commitment to Agenda 2063. In Sudan, this means an end to fighting, unfettered humanitarian access, and inclusive national dialogue. In South Sudan, it means a ceasefire, credible elections, and support for the AU C5 plus peace efforts, including the recent summit in Addis Ababa. In the Eastern DRC, it means defending sovereignty and territorial integrity and using our role as the chair of the Regional Oversight Mechanism to work with signatory states towards a durable solution. Solidarity also means strengthening the continent's capacity to respond to public health emergencies. As the African Union champion on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, South Africa remains committed to this work. We have made a contribution of $2.5 million to the Africa CDC through our African Renaissance Fund for the Ebola response efforts in support of surveillance, laboratory system, rapid response teams, and cross-border preparedness. Because we understand that the pandemic knows no borders. And we are one of the countries that can be able to contribute effectively to this response. Our Center for Communicable Disease is amongst one of the best centers of excellence in the world in this response. The third responsibility is to ensure that our foreign policy is anchored in is also credible at home. Because Our foreign policy is an extension of our domestic policy. The strength of our foreign policy is inseparable from our own resilience at home. It is therefore crucial, and that's why I started with the migration challenge that we're facing, because it is beginning to erode our international standing on human rights, that there can be individuals who are enforcing the law. On economic terms, our domestic capability is beginning to yield results. We have recorded a historic tax collection milestone of 2 trillion. We have recently secured another positive credit rating outlook, and we have made headways in addressing load shedding. Our economic diplomacy is also yielding results, including in agriculture. In 2025, South Africa's agricultural exports reached a record 15.1 billion rands, US dollars. 15.1 billion US dollars, not rands. In the first quarter of 2026, farm exports reached 3.7 billion US dollars, an increase of 11% year on year. These exports reach markets across Africa. The African continent constitutes almost 50% of all our exports on agricultural outputs. The European Union, Asia, and the Middle East. This shows how foreign policy can support jobs and economic opportunity at home. Again, we were tasked with the process of diversification for our exports outside the farming or agricultural outputs. We have also achieved a huge milestone to find markets for the South African companies across the globe. And again, 45% of all our exports, particularly of processed goods, goes to the African continent. So the African continent is a key pillar of our foreign policy, of our economic trade, and also of all that relates to our own, even our own industrial capability in the country, is directly linked to what we can export throughout the world. And the first market is the African continent. With now the growing AfCFTA, this again presents a huge opportunity. These are the responsibilities we have at this moment. I want to conclude with a quote from former President Mandela, which reminded us on the eve of our freedom, when he said, "We are prepared to shoulder our share of responsibility, not in the spirit of paternalism or dominance, but mutual cooperation and respect. On this day, we renew this commitment with vigor, that we should not shy away or bury our heads in the sands, but we need to confront the challenges of the day, involved in dialogue, involved in finding solutions, and continue to stand tall as a South Africa that is Pan-Africanist." Thank you very much.